Hello and welcome. I'm Erin Daly, and on behalf of myself and Jimmy May, I'd like to welcome you to this segment of the Good Legal Stories series, a corollary to the Good Stories movement sponsored by the Normandy Chair for Peace, an endeavor whose motto is, "We will have peace on earth when we have peace with the earth." To that end, the Good Legal Stories series spotlights landmark environmental cases from around the globe through the voices of those who worked on them or decided the cases. Today, we are absolutely delighted to have with us Oliver Houck, whose dedication to the environment and to the people who depend on a healthy environment, that is, all of us, has been wide-ranging, long-lasting, and truly profound. To most people watching, Oliver needs no introduction, but Jimmy, will you do the honors?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It'd be my pleasure to. We have a bio for Oliver that's posted on the website, so you can read more. This is just a sketch of his bio, which is that he has his bachelor's degree from Harvard, his law degree from Georgetown. He's a former federal prosecutor. He was general counsel to the National Wildlife Federation and has just retired from teaching at the Tulane Law School in New Orleans. He's also the author of numerous books, including a book really about stories, about good legal stories, that's Taking Back Eden, as well as dozens and dozens of law review articles, chapters, essays, and other writings that have had a profound influence on me, on Erin, and on others and future generations of activists, advocates, and lawyers across the globe. And without further ado, let me welcome you, Oliver. Thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours. Please tell us about the case that you're talking about.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Erin, and thank you, James. Every time someone runs down your background, it seems like an epitaph, right? And at my age, it takes out even more, so we'll get into it. The case I'd like to talk about is one that I never brought. I was ready to bring it, and being able to bring it enabled us to get to the finish line. It involved a very large project at the Corps of Engineers. And to make a short story short, the Atchafalaya is the subject here. The character, if you believe in rights of nature, the real plaintiff here is the Atchafalaya Swamp. And it is 1 million acres of bottom hardland hardwoods swamp. It's the largest such thing remaining in America. The Corps of Engineers, in order to improve its flood control capacity, because it's an outlet for the Mississippi at high water time, was planning to dig a 100,000 square foot channel right down the middle of it. And they thought that would speed away the flood water all more rapidly. Well, for hydrological reasons, that wasn't in the word, but for biological reasons, it was death to the swamp. The minute you dig a big ditch down anything, everything else drains into it. You're drying out the terrain around it. And that pleased the landowners in the basin enormously, because they had 1 million acres that was suddenly going from $100 an acre to maybe $2,000 or $3,000 an acre. So incredible landowner pushed up behind this project. And the Corps, believe it or not, had been building this project since the Great Flood of '29 flooded all of South Louisiana. And so this was the great project that was going to save New Orleans. There wasn't any way we could stop this project from happening. It was a needed project. It was just the way that they were going about it with the big channel was highly destructive, and as we finally proved to them, wouldn't work. Now I got into it because I got a call from a guy that in a thick Cajun accent said, "Come on down here and save Atchafalaya." Come on down here. I got Atchafalaya. Well, that could have been an alligator, some kind of food. And so I said, he explained it was a swamp and it was a Corps project. And I said, let me look into it. But I also said, sure, this is my second day on the job. I don't have any other docket. I'll help you stop this project. Impossible. So then I'm hooked. I look into it, and guess what? Big as this project is, and it's been going on since 1929. It's going to cost over $2 billion in 1970 money, and they're only halfway through. So, I mean, it's going to happen. So I said to the General Counsel Wildlife Federation, hey, I've looked this up. Huge project, no environmental impact statement. Suing would be a laydown. Man, man, we'd win that. I think they'd have to cave. They just have to confess error. And the general counsel said something very wise. He said, and then what? I said, well, we win. And that's what BDF is doing. That's what NRDC, we'll catch up with them. And he said, and then what? Well, we get an impact statement in a minute. And he said, well, after they write the impact statement, then what? And I said, well, we might sue, challenge the impact statement. And if they change the impact statement to meet your complaints, then what? And I'm flummoxed. And he said, I got an idea. Let's go to the engineers, the chief of engineers. And we got a big gun to pull in, Tom Campbell, who's the kind of top dog in Washington, DC in the environmental movement, an aging Mormon of impeccable integrity. He's well known on the Hill. He's well known everywhere. We'll bring in Tom. So Tom and Bob and I go to the general, the head of the Corps of Engineers. He said, you know, we got a lawsuit here and you're getting sued and losing, but we got a better deal. Let us work with you on the impact statement and we'll make it a better impact statement. And he said, sure. And we said, well, by the way, it wouldn't make any sense to be continuing to dredge that damn center channel while we were studying whether it should be done. And so he said, sure. When he agreed to that, we had a temporary restraining order against the whole important part of the project. You can build your levees, you can, do other things, but design, but you can't dredge. Wow. So that order gets sent down to New Orleans. New Orleans District has been running this project for almost 50 years. Its chief engineer dedicates his entire life to this project, Fred Chatry. And in comes this guy from Washington who, one, had never been to Louisiana, two, knew nothing about Louisiana, three, couldn't speak Louisianan, which is different, and four, didn't know anything about engineering or hydraulics or anything. And I go down for a meeting with the Corps and I tell them what we're going to do together. We're going to do an impact statement. We're going to consider alternatives to the project. And they look at me, dumbstruck, absolutely dumbstruck. And that started a war. And that war lasted 9 years. And every time it got testy, I'd show them the complaint. I say, here's the complaint. We don't want to file it, but it's written and we have a Washington, D.C. law firm ready to throw in all the costs and the joint lawyering. It was Arnold and Porter. They did pro bono work at the time. And so we had that in the hole, but it was a trump card we could never play. We weren't going to play. And so we fought over everything. The minute we got together with the Corps, it was just me and the Corps. I felt a little outnumbered. So I said, we need an independent engineer to give your engineering credibility. Well, hell no. So we went to the chief of the Corps who had sent us down, and we had somebody working with the chief who was on the Federation board, and he also was an engineer. His name was Ben Dysart. And Ben Dysart said, hey, they're screwing you with your plan down there in New Orleans. And so the order came down, hire the expert. Allow the expert. And then we said, you got to pay for him yourself. Said, what? Pay for somebody to develop a case against us? And we said yes, because he's already written a thesis that proves your project won't work. And the thesis of this is what we won the case on. If you dig a big channel down the middle, at high water, it will carry all the water. At low water, it won't carry water. And all the sediment is going to drop out in the channel. And when that happens, you won't have 100,000 square foot capacity. You might have only 50% of that capacity. If it happens again in second year, so you'll be dredging that thing for life. You'll be dredging that until your grandchildren are around, and that's very expensive. So that was our ultimate pitch, half of it. So we fought over the engineers. Then we fought over getting a scientist because we had a guy who said he saw an ivory-billed woodpecker in there. The man who happened to say it was the most renowned ornithologist in Louisiana. He was the last man to see the ivory-bill alive. He was a friend, and his name was George Lowry. So now they had a problem with Larry, and we waited a year to make sure there were no ivory bills there that could be disturbed. We never did find it, but it was another blow to them. So we're delaying them 2-3 years at this point. And then we said, and this was the hook, you got to consider alternatives. And you got to consider a way not to build this center channel. Well, hell, they say down below, they say right over here next door in the core district office, they say, well, we've been working on this for 50 years. We're halfway done. Why? What's our alternative? And we said, well, just don't build the channel. It'll still be a floodway, just don't build the channel. Well, that too was unthinkable. All this time, I'm duking it out with the landowner's attorney, Newton Trowbridge. I'm his public enemy number one. He's mine. He says nasty things about me, communists and that sort of thing. I say nasty things about him, like raper and scraper. And the Corps at that point says, look, the new colonel comes down. He says, look, I've been sent down to solve this by the Corps. That's the only thing that I've been sent here to do in the district, is get rid of this problem. Get rid of the Atchafalaya. It's the biggest project we've got going in America, and it's stalled. So just solve it. And so Tom Sands turns to me, and he turns to Newman individually. He says, it's only going to get solved if you guys can agree with it. Otherwise, you're not going to get what you want. I'm not going to get what I want. So I go meet Newman, and we cut a deal. And the deal is, unlike what the environmental community wanted desperately to buy the area and make it a park. And when that fell politically, then to buy the area and make it a wildlife refuge, and that failed. So there was no chance of buying it. But Newman feared that might go through. Jimmy Carter was president. Anything was possible. Now, what I feared was Ronald Reagan was coming in and nothing was possible. So we were going to have to get this deal signed fast. So we cut a deal. We would not buy the basin, but we would buy an easement that we called the A7 easement that allowed the landowners full timber rights as long as they harvested it in a sustainable way, didn't just clear cut the swamp, and all oil and gas rights. And so they get all their money, and we pay them virtually fee simple value for the easement. Newman says, fine, handshake. He's walking away to the bank. He gets all the money he wanted, and his people get to keep the revenues from the land. I get everything I wanted because we're going to keep it. Our slogan was wet and wild. We're going to keep it wet and wild. So we cut that deal, but then we had to sell it. And this was the last piece. The governor at that time was David Treen. He was a wonderful, honest Republican governor, which is why he didn't get reelected. But in his reelection campaign, he chose the Atchafalaya as his campaign issue. I'm going to save the Atchafalaya. You have to promise me, Newman and Oliver, not to claim this victory. I'm going to claim this victory as my deal. And we said, fine. And so he then claims the deal, and now he is in the position to sell it to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan comes down with, who was that? I wonder who's that awful Secretary of Interior? Well, I'm
James
blanking.
Watt.
Pardon?
Jim
Watt, notoriously bad. They hate the environment. See one tree, seen them all. Environmentalists are commies. I mean, it was the whole rhetoric. But Dave Treen needed to get reelected, and they need that seat in the Senate. And so, they need that state. They needed that state to be. I needed the state to be Republican. So they got behind the bill. The Republicans, even the one had to go testify in favor of buying all of the stuff to save a swamp, and he did, and it was saved. And here's the final beauty: we had that lawsuit in our pocket, and we never had to file it. I've never won anything like this, and I never will again. And I've won lawsuits, and I've lost lawsuits, but this was amazing. It's the happiest. It's a win-win. I told the Corps, if they ever get into heaven, it's going to be on this project. And I've always thought that way about myself too. If I go to see St. Peter, say, what have you done? I'll say, ever hear the Atchafalaya? So that's my 15 minutes, I think, very close to it. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Happy to handle any questions you might have. Please.
Thank you so much. That's such a wonderful story. And I'm just so amazed at how you condensed 11 years of really intensive work into just a few minutes, just to give us a sense of how complex it was. And I think for me, at least, that's one of the things I'm struck by, is just how many different kinds of different people you had to interact with, how many different domains you were dealing with, scientists and ornithologists and engineers and politicians at this local, state, and federal level, community groups and all kinds of things. And
we had a campaign going. We made a movie. Nova came down and did a Nova special on it. I'm sitting there, and Burt Lancaster is narrating, and he has me in the canoe, and he says, "Now, what's wrong with drain? What's wrong with this project? What's wrong with this draining project?" And I said, "Look around you. Who in the world has the right to drain this thing?" And the camera pans this beautiful swamp. So yeah, we had a PR campaign to beat hell. Yeah.
Sometimes that's the best argument, isn't it? Just look around you.
Would they?
I think that's the beauty. Yeah, that's
Yes.
sort of the beauty of being able to fight within the courtroom, but also outside the courtroom. And in that case, that's really where you had to have the fight.
You know, if you don't win outside the courtroom, your victories are hollow. You know, they'll correct the error. They'll go to Congress and overrule you. Both have happened on projects that I've been involved in. So yeah, the ground game is, and lawyers tend to ignore that. They think that my job is to win in court. No, that's not enough. Not enough.
Oliver, what do you think of the lessons learned, sort of the takeaways of that experience, and what do you think it means for this international and national movement toward recognizing the rights of what you just mentioned, of look around, of nature?
Wow. This was not a rights of nature case. I'd never heard of the concept at the time. It since would have been an ideal case for rights of nature, and it would have won in Ecuador, it would have won in Colombia, it would have won in Argentina, it would have won in New Zealand, places where they've taken an upfront stand on that. It would not be a good case in the United States because we have no such concept. And people, and I'm on the sidelines of this, but actively on the sidelines, are now looking at ways to empower the indigenous community that deeply believes in the rights of places like Atchafalaya. The Atchafalaya means long river, and has a spiritual meaning to the Natchez and the Homa and the other Indian nations that lived here. So that spiritual connect gives them, I think, a legal right to have a veto on projects, on permits at least. That's a technical argument, but it's being played out in 3 courts as we speak: Florida, Wisconsin, and Dakota. Yeah, there's a lot to be learned. I guess the thing you learned is litigation isn't everything, but without it, you're screwed. Or without the ability to do it, you're screwed.
Well, that's a great takeaway, and also makes for a great legal story as well. So we just want to thank you again for taking the time to tell us just this fascinating story, and it has such a happy ending, which few environmental stories do. So thank you for that work. Thank you for sharing the story. Erin, anything else before we say so long?
No, just my gratitude as well for the work you do and for joining us today. Thank you.
I feel the same way about you and the work you do. You've put constitutional environmentalism on the world map. And that was the brainchild of Jim and you. You have different perspectives on it. That is to say, you're coming from different places, but congratulations to you for what you're doing. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you, Oliver. Thanks for being a part of the Good Legal Stories movement. We really appreciate it. We hope to see you again soon. And those of you who watched this installment, thank you for joining us as well. We'll see you next time. So long.
Thank you very much.